For those who have been watching my videos about Vergil, so far I've gone over Devil May Cry 3 and Devil May Cry 4 Vergil. Across the main games, Devil May Cry 3 introduced the foundation for Vergil, or at least tried to, because DMC Devil May Cry blindsided us and changed a lot about what I liked about Vergil's gameplay. Reboot Vergil offered a lot of different aspects that were new to the character. Some were good. Other aspects I, of course, did not like at all. And some of those other aspects became the staple design to follow for the rest of the series. Devil May Cry 4 re-implemented some of these aspects, which again I did not like, and then Devil May Cry 5 tried to find the balance between all of the different versions and offered even more mechanics and moves that I believe to be handled very well. In the future I might go over the reboot Vergil in full detail, but we will see. DMC5 Vergil feels like the culmination of what they've learned throughout the years, which can be said the same about all the other characters that have been in 5 for quite a while, but this version of Vergil is my favorite to play, second to DMC3 Vergil. And no, I don't hate DMC5 Vergil, I just enjoy DMC3 Vergil more than him because this is coming from a guy who plays DMC4 Nero and I'm having a good old time. I'm happy. What I find funny is that they have constantly changed the identity of his kit across the games. Yamato, Beowulf, and Force Edge, now called Mirage Edge, have gone through some slight changes, received new moves, and even some super attacks. But Air Trick went from perfect to great, despite embedded swords, it was very functional, to what the hell is this, and now back to good with some trade-offs. Dante's and Nero's core foundation stayed consistent throughout the series. Dante's styles and his main weapons, his guns and Rebellion, function very similarly across the games. Changes and adjustments were made, but they weren't completely reworked. Nero stayed even more consistent despite some changes that happened where the average player wouldn't notice, just like with Dante. Not Vergil though. Between 3 and 4, he was changed heavily. And I want to talk about how DMC5 changed and in some areas fixed a lot of aspects with DMC5 Vergil. Now, I have mentioned before in my videos that the reboot version of Vergil became the next foundation for the later versions of Vergil. I say this because a lot of ideas that stemmed from this version of him branched onto DMC4 and 5, most notably how his teleports work and how Doppelganger is now introduced as a new mechanic for Vergil. Originally, it was in DMC3 as a style for Dante to have. Aside from this, Vergil still retains his functionality from DMC4 Special Edition, but there is a huge benefit that DMC5 changed to Vergil that affected him from 4, which may not seem like it's a good change, but it is. And that is his damage output. In DMC3, his damage output was kind of high, even a little bit for DMD standards. Like, he can easily dispatch a room that has DT enemies, but it still takes a lot of work because these enemies have hands and they will box the living crap out of you. Like, you will die. Even so, gaining DT meter with Vergil can be a bit too easy, which sets up a lot for DT explosion abuse. I'm glad it at least feeds into the dynamic of the scoring system since it counts for your overall style points, since you're basically sacrificing your DT for damage. So playing with Vergil in this game didn't feel broken even if you knew how to play well with him. For DMC4, this changed completely because all the new tools and benefits that he obtained, and his damage output was insane. His concentration or motivation meter paired with his summon sword formations allow him to blitz any enemy with his summon swords, DT rapid slash, and judgment cuts. Then there's distortion, which is a technique that allows him and Dante to increase their damage by transforming during the hit stop of various attacks, which make their attacks even stronger. And the final nail in the coffin is that DMC4 has very small health pools for a lot of enemies. Scarecrows, Frost, and even Angelos to some degree get completely nuked against Vergil's attacks. I often have to remind myself that Vergil is too strong. I gotta treat enemies with baby hands, otherwise they blow up. There's enemies like Blitz, which can be a huge annoyance for Nero since all he has is a level 3 charge shot where the explosion can miss if he's teleporting all over the place, and there's maximum bet if it's timed correctly, and that's only when they do a certain animation when they appear. Dante has an easier time because he has more tools to use, but he can still be a threat. For Vergil, I only have 2 words for you: summon swords. They immediately solve any problem that he comes across when he has DT to use, and that's not including how strong Judgment Cut End is, and that's only held back by his DT gauge. Yes, the concentration meter exists, but you can easily gain meter by standing in place for less than 5 seconds. Plenty of time for enemies to take their time to get to the player, especially if it's a Scarecrow or Mephisto, or if you just reorient the camera away from enemies, since they are designed to only attack you while they're within the camera's view. While these games had some issues, DMC4 mostly, DMC5 tried to make a decent balance across all 4 characters. There's a few outliers like Proto Angelo's health being absurdly tanky, but generally speaking, there is a decent amount of health to work with playing as Vergil. It's not perfect, but it works. No longer will I feel frustrated for trying to style on enemies only for them to disintegrate into ash within the palm of my hands. This makes fights a little bit more dynamic because enemies have actual time to engage with me, way more than DMC4. Outside of balancing the damage and health values across DMC5 to make it more manageable, there's also the concentration meter, or motivation meter if you want to call it that has been altered slightly. Instead of gaining meter extremely fast, it now takes a bit more time to fill up completely. Attacks don't increase the gauge that much, but dodging at the right time increases your meter more than usual. I personally think that the meter still shouldn't rise that much or any at all if the player is standing in place. In fact, I would think it would have been a nice touch if the meter was tied to S ranking rather than rewarding the player for standing still. I even think that it should go as far as giving the player access only to level 3 concentration when Vergil reaches S rank for the style meter. That way, there's even more of an incentive to do well in fights, considering that Dante has a mechanic that is tied to his style meter. There has been counter arguments to this though, where people saying that it wouldn't allow Vergil to play like Vergil, basically meaning Vergil wouldn't be able to stand still while parrying or dodging enemies, which I say, not really. Players that can use this character effectively can most definitely maintain triple S rank while walking or waiting for enemies to attack them so they can retaliate while still looking like a cold ass villain. What I'm saying is that the way that the meter currently works makes it somewhat easy to gain and even encourage a player to stand still so they can gain meter safely. But hey, that's just how I feel about it. Outside of the concentration meter and his damage, there's also his weapons that have received a few adjustments. Yamato, Beowulf, and Mirage Edge all have similar movesets like DMC4. However, there have been new attacks added to his moveset. Void Slash and Aerial Cleave were completely new for Yamato. Void Slash acts as this wide sweeping attack that implements this time distortion effect on enemies that become struck by this move, and additional damage is done once when Vergil puts his sword away. Aerial Cleave is this downward attack similar to Helm Breaker, and it also bounces enemies up as they hit the ground. These attacks work pretty well, but to me they seem somewhat redundant. Before, his weapons have abilities that had their own use. Now Yamato has ascending and descending attacks that line up to Beowulf and Mirage Edge. It's going to take some time for me to get used to that. Funny enough, I forgot that his summon swords aren't called summon swords in DMC5. They are called Mirage Blades. Guess that's my fault for not keeping up with attack names in the series. I called Nevin's aerial attack Air Raid, and this move is called Air Play from Inertia. Air Raid now lets Dante Inertia. One of my favorite things to do with Air Raid now is just the fuck? Hell, I barely remember King Cerberus' moveset by heart. Furthermore, I don't even know all of Pandora's attacks by name, and I've been playing DMC4 for literal decades now. Anyway, I'm getting too sidetracked. So let's see. Vergil has Aerial Cleave and Void Slash, yet Beowulf and Mirage Edge didn't really obtain any new moves, but they have received a few adjustments, which also include Yamato. The majority of these changes stem from the DMC4 iteration of Vergil refining some movesets or attacks that were already set in place. Like, Yamato now has this multi-hit property on Rapid Slash that can keep enemies juggled well after the move comes out. Before, it quickly knocked enemies downwards, even when they're suspended in the air. Yamato also has a few attacks that were tweaked. Some moves not having as much range when rotated a specific way compared to how they used to be, where you could perform the attack backwards and it will still connect with the opponent. Judgment Cut now can be performed multiple times in succession when you initiate a perfect release Judgment Cut, also called a just frame Judgment Cut. Because of its utility, you can chain Judgment Cuts in the air along with Air Trick to get some pretty sick results. Beowulf more or less has the same attacks with some minor adjustments. Starfall can now track enemies much easier, and there's no knockback on the initial hit, but there is this weird delay that happens with the attack. The startup is normal, but the hitbox comes out later than usual, which makes jump cancels with this attack really awkward and finicky to do. I missed the way that it worked in DMC3 a whole lot. Like it was perfect. At least we still have Lunar Phase, especially Aerial Lunar Phase, which works just as well as it does in DMC4. Another change to this weapon is that now you can use Rising Sun with Beowulf after kick 13, which now has a back forward input rather than having a double button input. To use Rising Sun, all you have to do is just keep the melee button input held down, which causes you to ascend in the air. I would have preferred to have Rising Sun as its own move, that way I can use it immediately and not have to perform it during a starting attack of any move, but this works. Even DMC4 was guilty of doing this too by putting this attack on Lunar Phase, but only when he is using Devil Trigger. I never understood the reason why Beowulf in particular needed to have this attack tied to other moves. Like he could have used it just fine without it. I'm not even sure why Beast Uppercut was given to Vergil rather than just having Rising Sun, but hey, I'll take both of them, I guess. Then there's also the change of his level 3 charges with Beowulf. Instead of Vergil automatically releasing the attack upon fully charging this weapon, he continuously hold it until you release the weapon yourself. Each charge still lets you do the just frame release as well, and it's really nice that they kept this consistent across both games. Then there is Mirage Edge, and yes, I got it right this time. There is this weapon where a lot of good changes were added. For instance, the range of drive has been increased across all 3 attacks. I never understood why it was so short in DMC4. Like, look at this, man. Like, it goes absolutely nowhere. The range is just pitiful. It is so much better in DMC5. You know what else is better? Aerial Stinger. Seriously, I can finally get the full distance of this attack without relying on Devil Trigger. Oh my god, you had to do everything while you was in Devil Trigger. You couldn't use the maximum length of Aerial Stinger unless you was in Devil Trigger. You couldn't use Down Trick unless you was in Devil Trigger. You couldn't file for your taxes until you was in Devil Trigger. Like, you couldn't do anything. He was crippled. It was a crippled Vergil. Even though we do have this move like working properly, the hitbox is a little bit too big. Like, seriously, just look at this. You end up stopping in your tracks even if you're occupying the same airspace as another object, but hey, I'll take it. It works. I disliked not having it as a normal stinger because this move is super useful for traversal when you're moving around in an area without enemies present. Even using this attack as a movement option in a combo is a nifty tool because it allows you to reorient yourself into a different position. You would think that Vergil in DMC4 would have a decent aerial stinger, but we got it in 5, so it's whatever. The one thing that did not change a whole lot was Vergil's Mirage Blades. These blades received some minor changes compared to his DMC4 summoned swords, such as their visual appearance, sound design, and the name of the weapon itself, but they don't gain any DT meter, which I've explained before in my previous video about DMC4 Vergil. The biggest change, however, is with heavy sword rain, where before it would send most enemies straight to the ground, while enemies like Angelos would be staggered a bit in the air. Now in DMC5, enemies that can be launched can be suspended briefly, almost as if they're in slow motion. These summon swords allow you to queue multiple types of formations too. Depending on how you input these attacks, you can even have 2 of them on standby. Now for the big thing that I think that was handled okay. I think decent is the right word to describe it, but it is his Darkslayer mechanic. And good news, Air Trick Up is back in business, baby. No more would I have to worry about gluing myself to an enemy whenever I use embedded swords, because that's a pain. Oh, and look, Down Trick is back on the style button. This is great. I love this. What I don't like though is that the game still wants me to use embedded swords. Not only that, but it also wants to make Air Trick inputs not quite like how they used to be in DMC3, which was completely perfect. I don't need to explain any further. Now, in order to do air trick up, you have to let go of the lock on button and press the style button. And to air trick back, you have to press back, then forward, and then the style button. I have talked about this multiple times across different videos, and hopefully this will be the last time I will ever bring it up. And as I stated many times before, Vergil's air trick inputs were perfect in DMC3. You couldn't mess it up. However, despite my grievances with these new inputs, I will say that DMC5 teleports offer more versatility. Instead of only being able to cancel air trick with judgment cut, basically the normal air trick that teleports Vergil directly to a target, Vergil has the ability to chain multiple judgment cuts together with back trick and trick up, something that isn't really possible with DMC3 and was very limited in DMC4. Vergil could only air trick with judgment cut but could not cancel air trick down, and with air trick up, that is only within certain situations like embedding a summoned sword from an attack or using judgment cut in, which can also cancel out a lot of different ground attacks. Also, both require you to be grounded in order to set up, which makes it even more limited. With DMC5, you can use it whenever that you want, and while you cannot cancel air trick with judgment cut, you can, however, cancel it with DT or with SinDT for a much faster cancel, which almost gives the same treatment as Dante's Sin Devil Trigger, except his version cancels everything that he does when he's in triple S rank. Because of how his Darkslayer system works in this game though, you are free to teleport in any way that you want, which is amazing. This is all I ever wanted, and it was the biggest issue for DMC4 Vergil. That Vergil felt way too confined to do whatever thing that you're locked onto. Speaking of devil triggers, even Vergil's devil trigger was reworked, so now it allows him to use Doppelganger, similar to how it did in DMC Devil May Cry. Vergil summons a clone of himself that copies every action with Yamato. Based on its position to the target that you're attacking, your inputs would translate to the clone. So say if the Phantom was standing right across from Vergil from the target that you're attacking, and you input a back move, that Phantom would treat your input as a forward motion due to its position, so they will use rapid slash instead of upper slash. The clone can also be ordered to act as fast as Vergil, have a slight delay, or have a long delay. I like this because it allows you to be pretty much varied with your doppelganger instead of having a set speed or a set reaction time for it, which is pretty neat. Another thing to note is that when you switch to a different weapon, he will become desynced with the player, allowing you to basically detach yourself from the doppelganger. I haven't really dived into too much tech for doppelganger since my brain doesn't have enough wrinkles to process two characters at once, but from what I've played, he's pretty good. I also have heard that the DMC reboot Vergil offers a, I guess, better version of Doppelganger, which allows the clone to use Angel and Demon mode. So basically, this means that Vergil's clone in DMC Devil May Cry allows him to use more moves compared to DMC5 because you're only locked to one weapon. I do know that modded versions of DMC5 allows Vergil to change weapons with the right trigger, while the left trigger doesn't affect the clone itself, so you can still desync the clone from Vergil. In addition to his devil trigger, there's also his Sin Devil Trigger form. It's not a separate form with its own attacks like Dante has with Sin Devil Trigger, but it has its own perks. For starters, every combo that Vergil has contains an additional attack or different property, whether it's a longer animation, an additional attack, or a different property to an existing attack. A lot of Vergil's moves were changed in some way. One of my favorite additions is Starfall receiving a second kick when you hold down the melee button. You can even jump cancel out of it, which is pretty cool. One additional thing to note with SinDT form is that when you use Doppelganger with Vergil, it also copies the SDT version of that attack with the clone. The only problem is that you cannot deactivate SDT while keeping Doppelganger, but this is kind of neat to use. With Vergil's added versatility and additional moves that were given to him, he's been allowed to basically flourish as a competent character. The main issue with DMC4 Vergil is that he was too reliant on his devil trigger to take advantage of his Darkslayer style. Him being hampered with embedded swords not allowing him to use air trick up at all was a complete bummer. And having to always use DT in order to use air trick down is just like why? DMC5 Vergil fixed a lot of those issues more or less, while also tweaking a lot of moves, making him way more enjoyable to play for the average person. There are definitely some cool perks about DMC4 Vergil, such as having the ability to cancel attack with judgment cut cancels. Even with weapon switch judgment cuts, those are pretty nice. But DMC5 Vergil makes Vergil feel practical to use, and I still appreciate playing him whenever I boot up this game. No matter what, I still like DMC3 Vergil the most, but DMC5 Vergil is just pleasant to play with, and I don't see myself dropping this character anytime soon. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. This entire Vergil project has been really neat to do. I never realized that talking about each character throughout the series, at least each version of Vergil, would be kind of entertaining, but I'm glad that you guys enjoyed the videos that I put out. Darksiders 2 is still next, like that is coming up. I'm going to be playing the game pretty soon. In fact, I've already started my playthrough. You can watch it on Twitch right now. I'm actually going through the game. Up next, I will probably talk about DMC4 Nero, and then I have some future stuff that I have planned. I'm debating on going through Darksiders 3, but I am not entirely sure. That's mostly because of how they changed the direction of the gameplay, but again, not entirely sure. Outside of that, I haven't really been doing too much outside of YouTube other than just doing art here and there. I mean, you can see the sketch that I did about Vergil doing his taxes. But again, I really appreciate that you guys watch my videos. Like it means so much to me. But enough rambling. I'm done with the video, so I will see you guys next time.